and their obedience towards this rule or compliance or followance of these rules, regulations within the organization vary. In fact, the compliance towards the laws, rules or regulation depends on the various interests of the individuals. In order to explain this very framework that different individual has different interest, and thereby different individual on different basis they obey rules or even disobey rules. This framework he has explained through his categorization of this bureaucracy, that is mock bureaucracy, representative bureaucracy, and he is highlighting that individuals they follow the laws or rules and regulations within the organization based on their respective interest. So in his study he found out not necessarily people in a Weberian bureaucracy they tend to follow the rules and regulations. The general idea, if you take into account Morton is saying that in Weberian type of bureaucracy, people are very much focused on following the rules and regulation, and they forget that these laws, rules and regulation are meant for the achievement of certain goals. So in reality, the end of only following the goal following the rules, that is the means, while surrendering the goal, so that the goal displacement, and this in fact results into an unintended consequence, that is ritualism, that is excessive rule avoidance, or we can say stickler officials become rule stickler, and this results into delay. So there is a lot of dysfunctions to this particular type of behavior. There is something unintended consequences. That's what Weber is not focusing. These consequences Weber is not focusing nor is intending. When it comes to the ALVIN GOULDNER, in his study he found out that not necessarily within the bureaucracy everyone follows the rules and regulations. They in fact sticks to the laws, rules and regulations. Rather, within the organization, people have their own interest. So different people have different interest. So the obedience towards the law most of the time depends on the individual's own interest. So in order to explain the same, he developed the very framework that he is introducing. In order to explain that, he developed these three types of bureaucracy, or three patterns of bureaucratic behavior that he refers to as mock bureaucracy, representative bureaucracy, punishment-centered bureaucracy. Now let me elaborate upon this. See, there can be certain situation where the laws are not considered to be in the interest of the worker or even the managers. That means there are certain laws, rules and regulations. These laws, rules and regulations may not be considered to be important or may not be considered to be beneficial both for the worker as well as the supervisor or the managers. In such situation, it is being witnessed, as GOULDNER says, people do not follow these laws, rules and regulations, and when they do not follow, the managers also do not enforce it. Weberian theory, people tend to follow, people will follow. If they do not follow, there will be punishment. Gouldener in his study found out in certain cases where the law seems to be not in interest of either the, let's say, worker or the manager, the law seems to be ignored, or people seems to ignore or not comply to this law. The subordinate generally do not comply to this law, and even if subordinate, they are not complying to this law, the managers do not impose punishment. They do not punish because it is considered not to be not to be to the interest of subordinate or the manager or the superordinate. Like, let's say, for example, as Gouldener himself would refer. See, here he is referring that if you take into account anti-smoking laws in a public space, so many a time, this type of law is considered to be somewhat not that important, not in the interest of the management, or for that matter interest of the subordinate. They might have pasted, let's say, the warnings as per the legal requirement, but in actual case, in reality, people might be smoking, people might be actually smoking within the office premises, but still the management may not be very strict on enforcing it, because such type of law may not be in the interest of both the parties. So this gives rise to a type of what you can say pattern in the organizational behavior, a pattern in terms of following the laws, rules and regulation within the organization, that is being referred here through mock bureaucracy. So it is a type of organizational behavior, the behavior of organizational man, where the laws are ignored, the laws are violated, but it is still, even if it is violated, it's not enforced. Because it is, why it is not enforced? Because it rarely remains in the interest of the superior or the subordinate. Second, if you take into account the representative bureaucracy, see, this is basically referring to such type of laws, rules and regulation where the interest of both the subordinate and the superordinate lie. Both the superior and subordinate are interested in these laws, rules and regulation, and moreover their interest is very much linked to these laws, rules and regulations. So here in this particular context, both are going to comply. The superior is going to enforce, the subordinate is also going to comply, because here it lies to the interest of both the subordinate as well as the superordinate. Like, let's say, as Gouldener will say, in a mining organization, if you take into account the safety norms, the workers mostly are going to follow it, and management is most likely to enforce it, because in compliance to this law lies the interest both of the worker as well as the manager. So this gives rise to something what he refers to as representative bureaucracy. And the third condition, punishment centered bureaucracy. See, here he is referring that there are certain laws that is considered to be in the interest of one category, and while it is considered not to be in the interest of another. Especially certain type of laws where the manager's interest or the employer's interest is involved, but it might be contrary to the interest of the workers or the subordinates. In this type of situation, the subordinate will resist the compliance to these laws, rules and regulation, while on the other hand, the superior will try to enforce such rules and regulations. That is what gives rise to what is being referred here as punishment-centered bureaucracy. Punishment-centered bureaucracy. What is this punishment-centered bureaucracy? Punishment-centered bureaucracy is that it is a type of situation, it's a type of organizational environment where the superior is intending to exercise control over the behavior, the action of the subordinate, while the subordinate is resisting the control over him. Why? Because these are certain laws, rules and regulation in which the employer's interest is there, but the worker's interest is not there. So that is why on one side the employer would like to enforce it, another side the worker would like to ignore it. So that results into the worker resisting, posing a resistance to such type of laws, rules and regulations. Now let me highlight a few things here. If you take into account Gouldener's study, Gouldener's study also establishes, very much like, let's say, Robert Morton, that the consequences, the actual consequences are not exactly intended, but he is differing from Robert Morton. Robert Morton, in fact, is highlighting that people within such type of organization are very compliant towards laws, rules and regulation. They follow rules and regulation, and this compliance becomes somewhat ritualistic, resulting into overconformity, and this overconformity leads towards displacement of the goal. This is something dysfunctional. Okay, so this was highlighted by Robert Morton. ALVIN GOULDNER also highlights that there are certain unintended consequences, but he very much emphasizes that if you take into account in this organization, in such type of organization, the conformity towards the law is not necessarily a rule. Not necessarily in a Weberian type of bureaucracy, people conform to laws, rules and regulation. They follow rules and regulation. Rather, as he highlights, it depends on the interest of the individuals. In certain type of laws where people perceive that their interest is not involved, whether manager or the worker gives rise to mock bureaucracy, where laws are violated, laws are ignored with impunity, because one is violating, other is not enforcing. In the second case, in representative bureaucracy, both are very much compliant towards laws, rules and regulation, and here they comply to these rules and regulations because in the compliance lies their own interest. But in the another case, that in certain type of activity, certain type of cases, the interest of the superior is involved, interest of the employer is involved, but with regard to that, the subordinate interest is not there. Like, let's say, attendance, regular attendance. The work hours from a particular time, 9 till this, or lunch of only half an hour, and within that people should comply. So if you take into account these certain things, it goes to the interest of the employer, but it may not be in the interest of the worker. In such cases, people resist. Workers resist. Now see, this resistance gives rise to something what ALVIN GOULDNER refers to as punishment-centered bureaucracy. Now, what is this punishment-centered bureaucracy? See, punishment-centered bureaucracy here refers to a type of system where the focus is on ensuring control, exercising control, ensuring compliance, and in case of non-compliance, enforcing punishment. So, if you take into account in this particular arrangement, the individuals within the organization, they would like to escape these laws, rules and regulation, because this is not in their own interest. So on one side there is something called resistance, and because of this resistance, people, the workers, those who are not interested, they will create, they will devise, they will design, they will innovate within the organization in multiple ways to escape compliance. So they might develop multiple ways to escape this compliance. So when those who, let's say workers, since they believe it is not in our interest, they will try to actually escape compliance. They will try to, in fact, not follow those rules and regulations. So in such situation, the manager's interest lies in enforcing control. So on the other hand, the workers, they want to escape. This will give rise to the more rules, more regulations, more control mechanisms. So moment the manager feels their control is weak, on this account they need more control, they need to more regulate. So they will increase, they will bring in more laws, more regulations, more procedural controls to ensure compliance on the part of the workers. And workers will go for more, let's say, they will devise more strategies, more escape routes. So this resistance gives rise to different type of behavior within the organization, an unintended type of consequence that comes up within the organization, and something here being referred by Mayer, a theorist named Michael Mayer. Mayer says this gives rise to organization. Organization here refers to laws, rules and regulation. Let's say escape or weakening of control. Control and more organization, and this goes on.